Welcome back to the Press Club, and thank you for staying with us. We have with us here Jerry George, media expert, and also Nick Fillmore, media trainer, former CBC producer. When we say CBC, we're talking about Canada. And he's here for 3 weeks. He's been here for 2 weeks, training our local media and just getting a feel for how we do things on the island. Welcome again to St. Lucia, Nick. Let's not get that wrong. And welcome to the Press Club.
Thanks very much.
Nick, I know that you were with Rick, earlier on in the weekend, so probably that's confusing me.
Right.
How has it been for you so far?
Well, it's been quite interesting. I'm very pleased to be invited to come to the island. It's the first time in quite a while that anybody's been here to help, perhaps, with journalism, looking at it from the outside. I'm quite encouraged in a broad sense of the way there are a number of quite good people who are enthusiastic and eager about their work. I find that. Individually, journalists are kind of well equipped with all kinds of technology and things which are very important these days. So what I have done now is that the first week I spent a full day at a television network, at the television station at DBS, and I followed the station right through its whole day's procedure from 8:30 in the morning until it went to air at night. And that allowed me to see that reporters come in late for meetings. It allowed me to see that when reporters go out on assignments, they're not quite as prepared as they should be. I got to see when things are made and put together that there's not quite enough staff to do it, and then the show going to air and so on. So I found that the things that I saw there are fairly typical, that the same kinds of things that are going on at the other stations. That's not to say that the station's all bad or anything, just those are the kinds of things that help me do a better job in recommending what happens here.
Mm-hmm. And comparing that to what happens where you're from in Canada, I know that the CBC is a large outfit. You have producers, you have sub-producers, you have PAs, and all those people involved in the production. Just talk about how what you have seen here differs or compares with what you have been used to.
Well, in Canada, they think that they don't have enough staff when they have all kinds of...
Have them come here.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there has been a long time a much more professional level of journalism in Canada and the States. The other day, I took there's a condensed 10-minute version of our national news that we give to airlines and so on, and I played it for people. I guessed, it seemed to me that of the 6 or 7 reporters on that, they've been in television at least 15 years. And here you're dealing with people, some of the people I've had have only been just a few months and some 3 or 4 years. So it's a totally different situation. Changes can happen here. I think we have to see a situation where the owners and the managers of the companies, they do have to try to see if they can't put a bit more money into various aspects and gradually lift things up.
But I think, Nick, if you look back at the history of the CBC in Canada, they did take a definite stance as to wanting to do something the Canadian way, if you wish, right? And that allowed the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to develop its own sense of worth and what was needed. And I think that it is a good model for a place like St. Lucia. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we in St. Lucia need to sort of look at what is it that we need to do to make our organization more or less St. Lucian,
Yeah.
And this is not always something that it's easy to sort of sell to people, because we're always in this, this zone that, whatever comes from overseas is always much better than what can be produced locally.
In Canada, the CBC was based on the BBC from the UK, and Canada is such a large country that one of the underlying important things about the CBC is that it's to promote national unity, and with the difficulties we've had in Quebec over the years and so on. So that's been a big focus for us, just to do the journalism to make people in one part of the country understand what goes on in the other part of the country. I know there's a sense of nationalism here from the government, but I don't sense that there's a feeling of purpose and goals coming from journalism itself. It doesn't strike me that there is, and you could use a bit more of that.
Well, I mean, from our standpoint, we have a lot of independent commercial stations that that function outside of the purview of the government. So, you know, with everything else and everywhere you go around the world, what people are looking at is the bottom line. So if they can make the most money for the least cost, they would do that, you know. And with that, though, we cannot erode the standards that we expect for journalists and for media, you know, not only here but around the world. And this is what has been happening. We're going to talking about staff. What has
Clinton,
been
before you go on, you know, you must address the issue of standards. And perhaps one of the things that's missing, which is available in Canada, is there is a radio and television commission. Am I right?
Yes.
And this commission more or less set a tone as to what it expects of its radio stations, commercial or otherwise.
Right.
And perhaps that is something that we need to look at as a way of getting to where we wish to be as far as the standards are concerned. I don't know
But-
if that is if that
I
is.
kind of feel more the board of directors of the CBC probably plays that role. The CRTC did that in the beginning. I'm afraid now what has happened is that the CRTC is there more to make sure that private enterprise and private corporations make money from the media. And that's the way things have changed in the modern times.
The CRTC is the what, Canadian?
It's the Broadcast Control
Right.
Organization. Yes. Yeah.
But I do think. Do you think that something like that would be of any assistance there?
I'm not sure at this stage. I think one of the questions I have is, are too many electronic media being given licenses in this country over the last period? A lot of TV stations, a lot of radio. I think maybe the government might want to look at the situation of creating a criteria and making sure that when a company says you're going to give a company a license, how many reporters can they put on the ground? How many hours of local programming can they do?
Right.
You don't need to just pump in American or Canadian programming. You want any new people on the block to be able to serve this country.
Well, I think there are, going back to the standards, Jerry, I think there are standards set, you know, in given the licenses. I think what our problem is and continues to be is the enforcement.
Right, yeah.
Right? So you have the standards, you have the blueprints there, but nobody follows them. And therefore you see a deterioration of the entire system. And what needs to be done, as far as I'm concerned, is for those standards which we have set to be enforced, for people to be reminded of them, and for us to build on those standards. We can borrow, but I don't think that we should be importing wholesale, you know, from Canada or the US or the UK. We need to develop something that is inherently, you know, St. Lucian, because we have a different culture, we have a different ethos, you know, the way we do things, you know, a bit different, and we have to structure our media and our industry to suit, but not forgetting the standards.
Right.
Yeah, that is global, that goes throughout, you know,
Yes.
the media landscape.
Yeah. In terms of the actual journalism, I would have to say that there's not enough initiative shown on the part of probably newspaper reporters in having that gut feeling to really go after a story. This morning I had Rick Wayne with me at GIS for a training session, and both of us happen to have a lot of background and experience in investigative journalism. Journalists have to realize that being a good reporter is not a 9-to-5 job. And some people are just coming into the business to get a job. And they don't think about it enough ahead of time. They're not prepared. Young people have to read more. You have to read all the time to be a good journalist and do things like that. So there has to be a culture created among the journalism profession to make sure people read, that they have the ambition, and that they want to really build their skills. And I don't see quite enough of that at the moment.
But I do think that the formation of the Media Association of St. Lucia is so critical to everything that we're talking about. And I'm very happy for the persons who have come forward in terms of seeing the necessity of the Media Association, because from there I could see that we're branching off into several areas where we can, I wouldn't say influence, but at least persuade media owners, the professionalism that is needed among our broadcasters, the professional that is needed among the reporters, as you mentioned. These things can only come about when we ourselves decide that we want to professionalize the profession. And we can only do that when we begin to realize, hey, there are shortcomings which need to be addressed, and to be addressed by ourselves rather than waiting on the heavy stick from a government trying to impose certain rules and regulations.
Totally. Right? I agree totally with that. I think that having a media organization now is great. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had the chance to come unless it had been organized and had invited me to come here. So yes, I think that's crucial, and I think that it can organize its own training inside the country and have other people come from outside as well. I often like to see when a trainer like myself comes in from Canada to have a partnership with a local trainer as well. So the Canadian or whoever gets the context of the country and the culture and those things. And then perhaps I will know some newer, modern, more things, perhaps from what happens in the Canadian media that might help.
And to Jerry's credit, I mean, Jerry has been fighting that battle sometimes, the lone voice in the wilderness for a very long time. And to see it finally materialize, the Media Association back up and running, that's a very good thing. And the first thing that we have been able to do is to get Nick, and that is very commendable to all those who have contributed towards that process.
And we also have Wesley Gibbons coming in this week,
right,
as well, to further strengthen what we're doing. And I think that Wesley will bring the perspective of the Caribbean,
exactly.
Because if you look at what happened, everything that's happening in St. Lucia is the same thing in almost every country in the region.
Great. Well, let's take a break. We want to talk with Nick a little bit more. We'll just take a quick break right now. We'll come back with Nick and, of course, Jerry. Jerry's not going anywhere. He's actually tied to this table. So stay with us. You're watching The Press Club, and we'll be back right after these messages.